that we have some Hall of Famers in our presence. Don't run out, Marissa. She's running to get her baby. But yesterday, Marissa Ellis and Jennifer Guest and Caitlin Rainey were inducted into the Perry Junior League Hall of Fame. And I've already got Marissa's autograph. Jennifer, I'm coming for you next. And Marissa's autograph today is worth 5 times more than it was yesterday. Oh, there's Caitlin. I didn't know you were in here. So there's Caitlin. And so I'll be coming for yours too. I'm going to see you this afternoon. So I will just get it there. But I have enjoyed this series. I don't know if you have or not. I have enjoyed what God has been speaking to me personally. In fact, this week I'll just give you a testimony. I was doing my sermon for today and had most of my notes done, and as I usually do, I was sitting down, I don't know, maybe Thursday night, was looking at Facebook, and this is a political season, so all over Facebook there's all sorts of stuff that is out there. There was just one particular post from somebody sort of being derogatory towards one of the presidential candidates, and I found it temporarily very humorous, and I laughed, and so I said, I'm going to share that, and I shared it. And right as I shared it, God said, have you thought about your sermon notes that you're working on? Have you thought about what you're getting ready to say to your people today? And so I quickly went in and deleted what I had shared, and nobody had liked it or anything, so hopefully you guys didn't see it wasn't like profane or anything. It was just not really going to fit in with the sermon, so to speak. But this is that type of season. I mean, we are from now to November in a very heightened, a very sensitive, a very important time in our lives. And I know that when I was a kid, I really grew up without any thought of voting. I really grew up with any, it wasn't like when I turned 18, my first thought was, oh, now I can vote. It was more like, oh, now I can move out of the house if I wanted to. But we really, in November, will make some big decisions. And I hope that you've been here to hear the messages. And if not, I really want to encourage you to go back on our website or YouTube and find the weeks that you missed and listen to them. Because they all go together a puzzle. If you just catch one thing like today, but you didn't hear the other 3, you're going to sort of say, I don't get where he was putting all this stuff together. But if you go and listen to all 4 sermons, you will understand the point I'm really trying to make throughout this series. Because we are in that type of world. Let me just give you a quick recap, and again, this will just be very quick. The first week we talked about our moral conscience. We just talked about the reality that if our morality is not centered in Jesus Christ and in God, then it doesn't matter who's in the White House, it doesn't matter who you vote for, who you elect, our morality is flawed. And so hopefully the goal for each of us is to have Christ in the center of our morality, because if Christ will be in the center of our morality, it will change some of the decisions that we make simply by having Him in the center. It's not a person, it's not a political party that needs to be our moral conscience. God needs to be the center of it. Last in week 2, we talked about our Christian response. We talked about the fact that all throughout the Old Testament, as Israel is going through their captivities and their trials and their punishments and all that, God never once addresses the king. He always addresses the people. Now, I know that, again, we live in a media-frenzied world. We live in a social media-frenzied world. And all of us want to talk to the king. But what Jesus would say to all of us is search within first. Look within you. Look within your heart. What part of the problem are you playing, or what part of the solution are you not being? And so I believe God literally spoke to us that week just about that. And last week we talked about our faith being tested. And we talked about the reality all throughout Joseph's life. That when Joseph got sold into captivity, as a slave, that the very next verse said, and God was with Joseph. And then when he got sort of to the pinnacle and got falsely accused and got thrown into prison, the very next verse said, and God was with Joseph. And the very reality is of in your life and in my life, that hopefully we could fill in that blank and say, and God was with Rick. And God was with April. And God was with but God was with. And we talked last week that God is present and that God is faithful. Today we're going to finish up our series talking about our God-given duties. Our God-given duties. Now it may surprise you, but God in His Word does speak to government. And He does speak even further than that to us, to our part, our actions, our thoughts, what we're to be involved in, how we are to be involved in. And that's what we're going to look at today, because God has spoken to us as believers to say, here is what I'm expecting you guys to do. Here is the part of the puzzle that you play. Here's the part of the system that you are to be involved in. So we're going to look at that today and look at what our part is and what is our God-given duties. Now, the very first thing we're going to look at today, I'm just going to be honest with you, has nothing to do with government. In fact, when God said this, there wasn't even a government established. When God said what we're about to read, there wasn't a government. But right off the bat, before government is ever established, God said some things that still ring true today. Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 7. Very familiar passage probably to you. But let me just read it to get us into this. It said that God gave the people all these instructions. I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. You must not have any other God but me. You must not make for yourself any idol or any kind of, or an image of anything in the heavens or on the earth or in the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God who will not tolerate your affections for any other gods. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. The entire family is affected, even children, in the third and fourth generations of those who reject me. But I lavish unfailing love for 1,000 generations on those who love me and obey my commands. You must not misuse the name of the Lord your God. The Lord will not let you go unpunished if you misuse His name. The first thing today that I want to talk about is that one of our God-given duties is to give God priority. To give God priority. It's sort of like when you build a house. If the foundation is off, the top is surely to be screwed up. I did a mission trip. The very first mission trip I ever did was to Mexico. When we got there, we were building cinder block buildings for kids to come out to do camps. Like they would come and stay for a week at this camp. And we were building where the boys would sleep and where the girls would sleep. And I don't think anybody on our team had ever laid cinder block. Maybe you have. Maybe you're an expert at it, but we weren't. And so when we get there, the coordinator of the project sort of draws these strings out. They look like very insignificant strings, but they're put there, and he's leveled them all out and everything. He said, all right, the next level of block needs to stay right here. In other words, the top of that block needs to be right there. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I mean, it's 100 and some degrees in Mexico. We are hot. By 10 o'clock, we are sweating to death. And I'm just going to be honest. I was just good at just laying it up there and trying to... And in my mind, I was thinking, what difference does just that little bit make? I mean, if I'm just a little off or if I'm just a little above, what difference does it make? And the coordinator came by, entire little team of like 4 or 5 people who were working on this one section. He said, y'all got to take that whole row off. We're like, we just spent an hour getting that whole row up there. And part of my mind is we'll never get a building built this week if we're putting it on there and then taking it back off. But the reality was, at the very bottom, it was already above the line in some places and below the line in others. We had already set the building up for failure. It wouldn't matter what we did, the rest of the week it would have all been for naught because the very bottom level was not right. And that's the way it is for you and I. God says, give me priority. Give me priority. Make me the focus of your life. You mean over our spouses? Yeah. In fact, can I tell you here today that if you're married, your best bet is that your husband loves God more than you. Your best bet, men, is if your wife loves God more than you. If your wife loves God or your husband loves God more than you, that's a good bet for your marriage. Even over our children? Yes, God says, give me priority. And I know we live in a world where a lot of parents make everything about their children. And then the children run the house, and the children get what they want. And the children get this and that and so on. But God says, give me priority. You mean over our career, the very job I use to make the money to feed my family? Yes. God says, give me priority. Now, why does he say this? We have to remember. Israel had been in captivity in Egypt for over 400 years. So not one generation had passed, but several generations have passed while they were in captivity. And in Egypt, they worshipped well over 100 different gods. In fact, one study I read said there really was close to 2,000, but if you boil them all down, and some of them were very similar and all that, it turned out to be like 115, 120 gods that they worshipped in Egypt. And so generation after generation had been raised in captivity, had been raised in Egypt, watching the Egyptians worship all of these other gods, a god of rain, and a god of fertility, and a god of vegetation and growth, and all of those different gods. So as he brings them out, one of the things he wants to say to them first and foremost is, have no other gods but me. Give me priority. He says, do not make for you any carved images that would represent a bird or a fish or anything like that that you would worship or bow down to. And he says, and have respect for my name. The word God is not supposed to just be used when you hit your thumb with the hammer. We're to have respect and reverence for His name. And he lays that out and he says, give me priority in your life. And that's still the call to us today, isn't it? God is still pursuing us to the point that He would say to each and every one of us in here today, give me priority in your life. All of us in here face different challenges. All of us in here are facing different situations or different struggles or different battles that we're facing. And God would say to each and every one of us, regardless of the struggle, regardless of the battle, regardless of what's going on, give me priority in your life. And it's very key, because if we do not give God priority in our personal lives, if we do not give God priority in our country, if we do not give God priority at the very base level, it really doesn't matter, because the top is going to be screwed up. The top is going to be screwed up. So what do we do? Well, 1 Peter chapter 2, there's some verses that give us some guidance on what Christ calls us to do. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13 to 17 says this. It says, for the Lord's sake, submit to all human authority, whether the kings as head of state or the officials he has appointed. For the king has sent them to punish those who do wrong and to honor those who do right. It is God's will that your honorable lives should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations against you. For you are free, yet you are God's slaves. So do not use your freedom as an excuse to do evil. Verse 17 says, respect everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, and respect the king. One of the things he says to us is that we are to submit to authority. Submit to authority. Sometimes that's hard for us to do, isn't it? But we are to submit to authority. Sometimes we're good at it, right? I mean, I'm sure not everybody at State Farm likes wearing khakis and a red shirt, but they do. Maybe where you work has a dress code, and you may not particularly like it, but you abide by what the authority says, right? So we are to submit to authority. One of the things I want to talk about for just a minute about our government, not politics, but about government, is this. Some would say that our authority is the president. Okay, some would say that. Some would say our authority is the Supreme Court. Some would say that our authority is the Congress or the House. And one of the reasons we get so upset and uptight and excited and whatever is that we're counting on those people, or we're thinking those people are going to take care of issues. But today, as of right now, our authority in this country is our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And to be honest with you, no person is to have any more power or I guess power is the right word, that is afforded to them by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So let me think about this for a minute. That's what I did this week. What if I submit to the authority in this country, and the authority is our Constitution, what does that afford me? What does that open up for me? Well, it gives me the opportunity for life. I mean, all lives matter to God. We are created in His image. We are created by Him. We are knit together by Him in our mother's womb. Whether we have a lot of hair or no hair, whether we have blue eyes or green eyes, whether we're tall or we're short, regardless of what the characteristics may be, God has woven us together in our mother's womb. He has created us. And my Constitution affords me life. It affords me freedom of religion. And yes, even in our country, false religions. Religions that are off-base, religions that aren't centered on God, religions that aren't centered on Christ, they still have the freedom of religion. I have a right to peaceful protest. If there's something that I don't agree with, I have the right to go through proper channels to protest that particular thing. I do not have any right to violent protest. There is nothing afforded to me anywhere that says I can be violent in a protest. But I can have peaceful protest. It also affords me the right to bear arms. And not, bear arms, I got it. But the right to thank you, I just see if y'all are still there. The right to bear arms, the right to own a gun if I need to. But I also have to go through the proper channels to do that. I don't have the right to just buy it out of the trunk of some guy's car over at Walmart. But I do have the right to buy a gun if I want to through the proper channels. And I also have the right afforded to me to vote. And let me just say this. One of the God-given duties is to vote. Now, I'm just going to say to you, you should vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for unless you want to meet me after church up here in the corner. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but if you're 18 years old or older and you meet the criteria that is afforded to us to vote, you should vote.
Amen.
Thank you. But you really should. It's a God-given duty. And I know I've already heard through the news cycle, people, I'm just going to stay home, I'm not going to worry about it, whatever, I don't like either of them, whatever. You should vote. For no other reason. God has afforded you the right to vote. So we have the right to vote. So see, the problem in our country today is some people have tried to change the definition of authority because the authority has gone from our Constitution and from our Bill of Rights to people. And there are people that think they have more power than the Constitution and more power than the Bill of Rights. And not only that, but the reality is we have screwed up at the bottom. We have screwed up at the base. Many of you will remember back in the 60s, there was a movement that took place in the university system. You remember free love and people dropping acid and sit-ins and love-ins and all that kind of stuff. All of that was a societal push to take God to screw up the bottom. And it was successful for a few years, but it really didn't catch on. And so there was a different attack, and many of you will relate to this. They said, let's go a little younger. And so they began to attack our high schools, our middle schools, and our elementary schools. They took prayer out of school. They took the Ten Commandments. Every teacher used to have it hanging up on their wall, and they took that out. And they began to take God out of the young school system. To the point now that we have a moment of silence every day to think about the activities of the day. And so one of the things that has happened is we are now raising a generation, and many of you who are teachers have said this to me over and over. we are raising a generation of people who think they are the authority. Not that God is the authority, not even that their teacher is the authority in the classroom, not that their principals are the authority, but they are being raised to believe that they are the authority. So we have screwed up at the very bottom base level, and then we wonder why our country gets screwed up at the very top level. The final thing I think God says to us today to wrap up this series is found in Romans chapter 13. Romans chapter 13. Just read these to you. It says, everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they will be punished. For the authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing right, but in those who are doing wrong. Would you like to live without fear of authorities? Then do what is right, and they will honor you. I think we can just make a nationwide campaign with that verse right there, couldn't we? The authorities are God's servants sent for your good. But if you are doing wrong, of course you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They are God's servants sent for the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong. So you must submit to them, not only to avoid punishment, but also to keep a clear conscience. Pay your taxes too for the same reasons, for the government workers need to be paid. They're serving God in what they do. Give to everyone what you owe them. Pay your taxes and government fees to those who collect them, and give respect and honor to those who are in authority. I believe the final thing I want to say today is that God tells us to respect everyone. Respect everyone. Now I want to silence two little fables about respect. A lot of times when you talk to people about respect, you hear people say this, well, you have to earn respect. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have to earn respect. In all of my years, I had some teachers I really liked, and I had some teachers I really didn't like. But the school taught me, my dad's belt emphasized that I would respect all of them. I didn't like Mr. Sargent, my 6th grade teacher. The reason I didn't like him because you went into the class and he had the rep, so to speak, that he had a paddle and he liked to use it. And about halfway through that year, me and a buddy of mine named Brian found out that he really liked to use it. So I didn't like Mr. Sargent. But now I loved Miss Lawson, and Miss Cyphers, and Miss Wells. I love many of my middle school teachers. I had this high school teacher, couldn't stand. He taught calculus. He was, Mr. Wilson. You remember the names of these people, right? Teachers, remember this. Kids are going to remember your name. But I didn't like Mr. Wilson, but you know what? I sure did respect him. And it wasn't an option of whether I wanted to respect him or not. To be quite honest with you, he didn't do anything to have to earn it or lose it. In the classroom, he was my authority. He was the teacher. And so I was to respect him. Also, you hear this a lot of times when people talk about respect. Oh yeah, well they let me down. Well, they are like you and none of us are perfect. And so chances are, over the course of time, if you and I are around each other long enough, we're going to let each other down. But God has called us to positions, and God has called us to places. There are no perfect parents. There are no perfect children. Your boss is not going to be perfect. But yet, as those who have authority over us, we are to respect them all. And you say, Rick, why is this so important to you? Because I firmly believe the problems that we have right now in our country come from years and years and years of the bottom being screwed up. It didn't just happen in a year. It really didn't happen in a decade. It's happened over generation and generation of the bottom being screwed up. And so what we see now is sort of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. You know, the bottom is off, and so the thing looks like this. And that's the way it is in our country today. The bottom is screwed up. So we look at the top of our government, and it looks like this, and we say, why is it so screwed up? Because the bottom has been screwed up for years. for decades. It won't be long where it will be screwed up for a generation. And if you go back and look throughout history and you read what many people wrote down in books and papers and stuff, that it only takes about a generation and a half to change the course of a country forever. And so we're living in that time, and we are living in that day. And I believe that God would say to us today, to me, you get the bottom level straight. And if you have to take down everything, every mindset, every thought I've had, every way I was raised, if you have to take all that to get back to the bottom and get it straight, get the bottom straight. Because only through us doing that can we ever hope that the top will get fixed. Folks, we have a part to play in the life of our government. I have no doubt that some of you out there would be very well qualified to hold political office and run for those kinds of things. And maybe that isn't your heartbeat today or your course today. And even if it isn't, we have a part to play in the life of our government. Remember, these next 6 months, you need to be very mindful. You need to have eyes wide open. And you need to truly pray and ask God where He's leading, what He is leading you to do. I want to encourage us to do a couple of things. One, I want to encourage us to begin to give God priority in our life this week. So, well, how do I do that? Maybe you feel like you're already doing that. Or maybe you say, you know what, I know I'm not, but I really don't even know how to start. Here's what I'm going to encourage you to do. 2 quick things. One, I'm going to encourage you to read His Word every single day. You don't have to read the whole Old Testament in a day. You don't have to read, all the Gospels in a day. But read His Word every day. One of the reasons I try to mail out a devotional every day, because I know there's people who would say, well, I want to do that, but I'm busy and I'm on the go. And so I'll email out a devotional that you can read in a minute, 2 minutes. But you have to get into His Word. You can never reset the bottom if you never get into His Word. And then the second thing I want to encourage you to do this week is just to pray. Just to pray when it's not about food. So maybe it's on the way to work, or maybe it's coming home from work, or maybe it's a quiet moment that you have at work. Maybe you have the ability where you work to sort of, walk off for a while and take a break. But to be praying and asking God to restore the priority, to reset the bottom of our lives, of our country. To pray for our country and the leaders that we have. I'm going to encourage you to do those 2 things this week.